Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Media Watch. I'm your host, Dr. Savvy, and we come back with another home edition episode for you. Now, we've got a wonderful guest, someone who's not a stranger to Seek Channel, because ages ago, he used to do a really, really good late night show. He does lots of other things. He's been on TV, on the BBC, on various documentaries, and he's been doing some great work for the NHS recently in terms of some running activities and to raise funds for charity. The other thing we're going to talk about today is we're going to talk about, as we know at the moment, there's been a lot of discussion and marches with regards to Black Lives Matter, All Lives Matter. I think Del and I are approximately the same age, and we do remember growing up in the 70s and 80s and how it's important for us to communicate to our kids the struggles that we went through and even worse struggles that our parents went through. But I wanted to talk about a final story which really kind of got me to give Del a call and say, I'd love you to come on the show. And that was his Bond story, James Bond story, but I won't steal his thunder. Del, nice to see you. How are you?
Great to speak to you and see you too. I'm good,
Brilliant
thank you.
And you're doing good, and you're looking good as well. I remember seeing you on TV recently on BBC doing some great work in terms of fitness and all those important things. Tell us a little bit about some of the stuff you're doing for the NHS in terms of, you've done a lot of running recently, and you know, I love the thing you put up the other day when you did a nice little casual 5K run, but you are a pretty good marathon runner as well, right?
I run marathons. I wouldn't say pretty good because I'm quite a slow runner. But I mean, I was going to say, firstly, you sort of said we're about the same age. If we are, then you're doing better than I am because I'm pretty haggard compared to you. But so look, I have been doing a bit for.
I was born in the what it is. That's all I'm going to say. I was born in the 60s.
The 60s too, 1962, in fact. So there you go. So look, I had a change of life about 6 years ago where I underwent bariatric surgery. I paid to have my stomach made smaller. I lost 10 stone in weight within a year. So I became healthier. I also became more active. I started doing, I climbed Kilimanjaro. I started doing a bit of walking and then going to running. And I ran the London Marathon last year. I say I'm not fast, but I completed it. And I was due to run the London Marathon this year in 2020 at the end of April. But then, of course, COVID-19 struck and the event postponed till October. So I thought, look, I still need to keep my fitness up. I like running because it actually gives me a degree of mindfulness. And when I run, I often run sometimes with music, sometimes with Simran. And it takes me to a different place. So, I know Gurdwara's a shut right now, but for me, it gets me out in the open air, thinking about my family, thinking about the God, thinking about the world, and it's great. And so I thought maybe I can help myself during April, and I can help the NHS because these guys can't sit at home and work at home. So I decided to create a thing called Run for Our NHS. And what I said was I would run 10.5K every Sunday in April. And then by the time the fourth Sunday, which incidentally would have been the date of the London Marathon, came around, I would have completed 42K or 26.2 miles. So that's a marathon. And so I did that. I was doing it for two local NHS charities here in Peterborough. I've raised about £1,200 for those guys, which is brilliant. There have been some interesting asides. And I think the most interesting one was, I think on the third run that I was doing, as I was running through town centre, a kind of police car pulled up in front of me, flashed the blue lights, and I thought, oh dear, I'm going to get pulled over for being outside lockdown, even though I was running. And when I got close to the police car, there was two female police officers, and I said, look, am I in trouble? I'm sorry, I'm just out running exercise. She goes, no, you're not in trouble. We're just interested in your shirt because you've got Run for Our NHS. What is that all about? And I explained to them what I was doing, and the response was, that is brilliant. Can we have a selfie? And so they actually jumped out the police car, socially distancing. One of them took a selfie with me standing next to a police officer. And by the time I got back home, I had people calling me saying, Del, you realise you're actually on a police Facebook page. And the police are actually kind of like, a big pat on the back for you for doing all this stuff. So it wasn't a crime watch type thing. It was really a well done, Del. So, it's brilliant. But, during this last few months, and I've run a marathon in May. I'm going to carry on doing it in June. But so we've got some real inspirations. You've got people like Captain Tom, 100 years old, doing stuff like that. I met some local kids who actually asked me to come and join them for the 5K run. They range from ages 6 to 11, and they asked me to be a special guest and run 5K with them. And they've raised about $2,000 for local hospitals. So, it truly is remarkable what people are doing.
No, that's really, really good. And, you also have a friend of yours as well. You ran for his memory too, didn't you?
Yeah, so unfortunately, it was probably the person that got me into running was my friend Darren, who sadly was battling cancer at the age of 47. The irony was this guy was the healthiest guy. He used to always have a go at me about not eating healthy and all these things, and yet he was the healthiest guy. But a horrible illness like cancer just blindsided him and took his life at 47. And while he was going through chemo, I thought, how do I support you? And I said, what I'll do is I'm going to go and run a half marathon first. I did that, and then I ran the marathon. In fact, I'd say when I ran the London Marathon last year, I think I got to 24 miles, and I literally thought I was going to die. I didn't know if I was going to be able to carry on, and it was just thinking about. It's tough, and thinking about him in a hospice. Literally, that was a week before he died, so he was quite serious at that point. And thinking about him made me go those extra 2 miles and cross that line. And he was the first person I went to see after I got back to Peterborough. And like I say, sadly, within a week he passed away. But that's the thing. So my message to anyone out there is please don't take your health for granted, because there's loads of people out there can't do these things. I'm not saying everybody should try running a marathon, but please get out there, look after yourselves.
Absolutely. And I was going to say, I did the London Marathon quite a few years ago, so I know the pain. The furthest I'd run in my training was like 18 to 20 miles. So the last 6 for me were quite hard, but you have to kind of battle on. And it's nice and interesting that you say that you play similar while you're running. The other thing I wanted to ask you was also your brother, right? You've inspired people in your family as well to get fitter too, haven't you?
Yeah, so I think again, last year when I was running London Marathon, I got spotted because I was interviewed by the BBC on Tower Bridge, and as a result of it, I got asked to go and be in a documentary. I think you referred to earlier on. It's called "Who You Calling Fat," which is still on iPlayer, and it was a mixed bag of people who all identify as big-bodied. I was the oldest in the house of 9 people. I was also probably an ethnic minority, which is the reason I went on there. I didn't want it all to be gaudy on there. And the thing for me, and I was the only one that actually had surgery. So I was the lightest person on there, about 15 stone. I was the lightest one. And I think the heaviest people were much heavier. And it wasn't for me to criticize their weight, but I did actually sort of say to them, look, the health part is important, guys. You're in your 20s and 30s at a big weight and you think you're invincible. Trust me, when you get to your 40s and 50s, your mobility goes, you're on lots of meds, you're diabetic, it becomes horrible. And, I've got a website called bariatricman.com. It's a not-for-profit site. It just offers advice to people who are thinking about surgery or options. And strangely enough, when I had my surgery, I didn't tell anybody apart from my wife and I, the only 2 people, and of course the doctors, who knew this. I even got my mum off to India, so she wouldn't know about it. Unfortunately, she got ill and had to come back. So my wife stayed in Peterborough with her while I went off secretly and had my surgery. And when I came back, I was basically castigated by my family and friends for what the hell have you done to yourself? Why? And one of the most vociferous critics was my oldest brother, Manjeet, or Pete Singh, as everybody calls him. And, but the thing is, over the last 6 years, he's seen me change my life. And then last year he came to me and said, Daljit, I'm going to Poland. And I thought, well, why? There are no decent holiday hotspots left anymore. And he said, no, I'm going over to Poland to have surgery. Same as you. And I was like, wow, really? And he went and had surgery, same as I've had, which is gastric sleeve, where they basically remove 3/4 of your stomach. He's about 9 months in now. He has lost about 9 stone in weight. He is a lot healthier. He's come off a lot of the meds. He even told me the other day he's doing yoga now, which kind of like was, whoa, hang on, that's quite something. But, he feels better in himself. And so, if I'm inspiring and helping people who are strangers, then doing it for someone I actually love and I care about immensely that's the biggest thing, the biggest win for me.
Absolutely. So let me ask you about now. It's very important for us to consider what's actually happening right now. We don't have to necessarily talk about the Black Lives Matter movement or the George Floyd aspect. There have been I noticed in the crowd of some of the people that did go on some of the marches, there were some Sikhs there as well. that, politically wise, there's been a lot of, Sikhs have suffered a lot over the years. Sikhs have given as well. I recently saw an article that you posted with regards to, making sure that we honour the memory of those who actually gave their lives as well. For ourselves, I think as Sikhs we tend to be more humble. We are a giving race. We are a bit more selfless, but we also have been through struggles coming into the UK or moving to Canada or other places around the world. The individuals that came over showed a lot of courage, to lay their roots down, and they had to suffer a lot as well with regards to the main population here, And I think I think personally it's important to communicate to kids the journey that our parents went through, and we are still going through that journey right now. What's your views on really finding different ways in which we can communicate the importance of realizing our roots and also not being complacent, not letting our kids necessarily be complacent about the struggles that continue,
If you look at my pin here, it is a Black Lives Matter pin. Now, the reason I'm wearing that is because we had a protest here in Peterborough on Saturday, and I was a speaker. Now, I attended there, and I have to say, and if anybody finds it on social media, Peterborough is brilliant because we observed social distancing, we wore masks, we had no police there, we had no violence, it was peaceful. It really was brilliant. And there were about 1,000 people or so that came. The reason I spoke there was because I was fed up with people saying things like, on social media, like, what's the death of a black guy in Minneapolis got to do with anything in the UK? And my point was, it's got everything to do with what's happening in the UK, especially for those of us like you and I who were maybe born in the 60s, who went through a period where we had massive discrimination. So just to give you an example, when I spoke on the stage on Saturday, I said racism doesn't have to always be violent or a knee on the neck or whatever. It can be more subtle than that. So I know when we went to school here in the UK in the 1960s, there were 3 non-white children in school, myself and my 2 older siblings, my brothers. And we were told, our names are Manjit, Sarabjit and Daljit, or Manjit, Sarbjit, Deljit. Now, 2-syllable names, but they were too difficult. So we were christened, and I'll use that term, we were christened because we were given Christian names. We became Peter, David, and I became Paul. It could have been worse, it could have been Ringo, I suppose, but Paul is what the name I was given.
That's very biblical, actually, isn't it?
Yeah, and it is biblical, but at the same time, I mean, it could be a bit Beatlesque, I suppose, as well, hence the Ringo reference. But look, the point was, and that's what I said to the crowd the other day, imagine taking your child to school and somebody saying to your child, nah, I don't like their name, it's a tough one, we're going to rename it. That's what, if you ever saw the program Roots, that's what happened there. Kunta Kinte became Kubi because somebody gave you a name. It was almost like a slave name. Now, I'm not being over dramatic because I actually dropped the name Paul and I went to Deljit and people got used to it and then it got shortened to Del and I'm happy with that. My 2 older brothers have actually kept those names. They in business, they use them. People call them Peter and David now, so they've got a different perspective. But the point I'm making is, when you have to change to accommodate a system, that is wrong. You've got to sometimes let the system kind of like work with you. And then, I also talked about experiences, for example, on my 21st birthday here in Peterborough. We're not a hotbed of racism, but, I was sitting there, quietly with one of my older brothers and an English friend having a drink. It was my 21st. And, we were set upon by a group of 6 skinheads. Literally across the road from the police station. We were given what many would call a damn good hiding. It wasn't the best birthday present I've ever had. When the policeman finally came over, rather than asking me, and they came over so slowly, the skinheads walked away, didn't even run away. And I was like, why did you not intervene? Why do you not do it? And the guy looked at me, and rather than asking, are you okay? He said to me, what are you doing over this side of town? And I was like, really? Really? What? So because I lived in an ethnic part of town, a kind of ghetto as far as they were concerned, I'm not allowed out to drink where the Gordes sit, where the white people sit? Are you mad? And I was bloody and I was kind of angry and I called him an ignorant pig. He was a young officer. And I got arrested. So, the craziness was that the people that actually beat me up walked away, and I got kind of, hauled up, and it was the case of, you're going to be arrested because you're insolent and you've insulted a police officer. Now, I've got to say at this point in time, I've got absolute respect for the police. I've got members of my family in the police force and nothing against them. But it was a naive officer who said the wrong thing to the wrong person. The irony was that a few weeks earlier, I delivered a lecture to a group of new police officers on multiculturalism in Peterborough and policing.
Really?
So I know it's so ironic, and I had the name of the actual the commander at the time, and so when I dropped his name in the frame and said I want to make a phone call to him, I was released pretty quickly without charge, and a few apologies. So look, and then if we fast forward to things like Brexit a few years ago, some of us are still getting racial abuse because of Brexit. So it's not gone away. So to your point about what do we tell our children? We tell our children, look, you've got to stand up for yourselves, because I know people keep coming up with all lives matters. All lives matters is actually a hijack of Black Lives Matters. And sadly, most of the people that go around saying all lives matter are Gore, and they're quite right wing, and they're just trying to do that. Because my view is once Black lives and minority lives matter, all lives will matter anyway, because at the moment, Gore and white people aren't under threat. So as soon as the minority, those that are under threat, matter, everyone, we leave nobody behind. And so that's why I'm passionate about this. And, I have had some criticism from the Asian community about this, about, why you're supporting this. And quite frankly, if they don't get it, then really they need to look a little harder.
But I think it's important for, sometimes when you're looking at a perspective to walk in the other person's shoes, and sometimes it's not possible to do that. What I would say before we move on to the final thing I really want to talk to you about was racism can be direct, like you've experienced, and that's not going to get away from the fact that racism still continues to be direct. But it is also institutionalized as well, and institutionalized is the subtlety where you don't know what's happening to you, but it's being exercised, or the conversations behind closed doors, or the editorial that's been written with a particular bias, right? Or an editorial that's been written with a particular image that may be put next to the text. And in that sense, when you're reading the media, you're automatically being influenced by the picture, although the person may read the text or may not read the text, but subconsciously they're actually getting to you and putting, like maybe someone's described it to me who worked in quite one of the broadsheets and said, when they're going to talk about tech, sometimes they put a rickshawala on a mobile phone when they're talking about India. So you think, okay, there's a subtle message there. It may not relate to us necessarily, but they're planting that image, Well,
look, I've been in the IT industry now for 30 years, and I remember when my brother and I were first in that industry, and we were actually in kind of like front-facing, frontline sales roles. So we were actually people roles. And when you'd go to a big show, somebody would immediately look at you with a bug and being Indian, and it was like, "You're a programmer." That was it. You're a programmer.
I've had that as well. I've come to sign a, £500,000 deal, and someone said, "Oh, the photocopier's over there." It's a bit like that lawyer that recently went in and said that, "Are you a translator?" And she was the main lawyer. Let's move on to a few. We've got a few minutes to talk about the Bond episode. Now, I read your article. I thought it was really good. You were doing a mobile disco, so it goes back to the stereotype. I like a bit of jazz. You like a bit of rock. I don't necessarily, big Bhangra fan, nor are you. But if you like Bhangra, that's fine. Love it, do it. I like a bit of it. But ultimately, everyone has their own tastes. So you were in a situation where you were involved in the Octopussy movie. So we've got a few minutes to talk about that. The Bond Octopussy movie, and I think we've got some pictures as well to show with regards to you standing next to Roger Moore and stuff. This is Kabir Bedi, the picture we're showing right now. He was unfortunately, baddie. He was the Sardar in Octopussy.
That's right.
And that's with Roger Moore, the picture that with your brother. Tell us about this.
And I. Yeah, so basically it was 1983. We were doing our discos. 1982 actually. We were doing our discos, and we used to go around late at night and putting posters up, and it had the name of the Singh brothers, the disco, on there. And we would get calls for people booking discos up, but we got one strange call where somebody asked whether we were Sikhs, whether we wore turbans, and because the National Front were around, we thought it was a wind-up. But it turns out that it was a call from Eon Studios, who were filming just outside Peterborough on the railway. And when long story short, we went to see them at the local hotel, which had taken the entire floor out, and they told us what we're looking for is somebody that can tie a bug on Kabir's head and on the stuntman's head that won't come off, because they pulled out the bug they'd been using, which they bought from India, and it was like literally like a bath towel. And we laughed and said, "Where'd you get that from?" They said, "India." I said, "Well, you got ripped off there then, because that's the worst bug I've ever seen in my life." And I took out the bag, literally a 9-foot dastard that we were wearing, and that's a grey one that is in the photos, my school dastard. And we tied it on his head, and I said, "That's not going to fall off." And Kabir's a tall man, and when he stood up and he said, "This feels brilliant." And kind of Roger Moore was kind of like, "Well, just make sure it doesn't fall off when you kind of like get on top of the train and stuff." And we Bond saying, "It ain't going anywhere, Rog." And it was great. But what we did, we got the job. And in fact, they actually wanted one of us. They said, "We only need one of you to tie the bug." And we said, "Sorry, we're the Singh brothers. We come as a pair. So you pay us both." Right. And so we got £50 a day each. This is called negotiation. Up and in negotiate. So we both got paid £50 each, for about 3 minutes work a day, which is good work back in the 80s. And all it was is tie the turban on, then actually sit in Kabir's trailer or wander around.
And did your mum stitched some bugs as well, didn't she? And then you charged for those?
We did, because they said, "Look, when we leave here, we've got to go back and reshoot some scenes, and we need this grade the start, and we need that, and if you can do some more." And I said, "Well, yeah, my mum can make those for you, but they're not cheap." And so it's £50 a bug. It was quite good. It was 200 quid for Ford the Starter. I mean, I regret now. I think I'd charged them more, because I spent millions. Let's face it, it's a Bond movie. They're blowing up cars and stuff, so why not? And so they took these bug away, and then I'd say, I got on really well with Kabir. He gave me his address in Los Angeles. Sadly, I went off to university and I lost his address, only to find it literally, about 20 plus 30 years later. And he'd moved by then. He's back to Mumbai, and but then in 2017, a lovely guy running a thing called Turban Seen on Screen put together a special showing of Octopussy in London, and he asked me to present at that and speak at it, which I did. And then as a surprise on Skype
as well, haven't we? Yeah, we got a picture of that. With you standing in front of the crowd, actually.
And then he then actually got Kabir on Skype, sitting in Mumbai, and that was brilliant. That's Kabir in 2017, and so that's the first time we'd seen each other for 35 years. And he immediately, he was gushing. He was like, "Oh, Diljit, brilliant to see you. Remember those days? It was brilliant." It was like the guy knew everything, and it was lovely. It was a great memory. And it was like you did say you never called me when I left my number, and I was like, "Really sorry, I lost your number." But
well, you must go and see him again. When you go, if you ever get a chance to go to Mumbai, go to the Bollywood studios or whatever, and then I've done that tour with my dad.
To see him. I'd love to see him. He was a lovely, lovely gentleman. I know he's getting on a bit now, but he was a lovely man. It was a great experience. And again, the other thing for me is I'm a massive movie fan. I sat and talked with Roger Moore. I did tell Roger that Sean Connery was my favourite Bond, and he didn't mind. He was really good about it. He had a brilliantly dry sense of humour. He said, "Well, Sean can do his Bond and he can do certain things, but there's one thing I can do Sean can't." And I was like, "Go on then, what is it?" And he just raised his kind of eyebrow like he did in those films, lifted his eyebrow.
To realise that if he'd raised his eyebrow and looked up, then he would have seen a little halo because of The Saint. Because he did really great wonders in The Saint, didn't he?
He did. He was a marvellous actor, and I spoke to him about films like The Wild Geese, in which he was with Richard Burton, who's probably one of my favourite actors of all time, and he gave me some funny stories. So sitting around talking to these amazing people, getting paid, being involved in a movie, and even though I'm not in the movie, the star is actually immortalised forever.
The star is immortalised. I was going to say, Bill, it's so wonderful to meet you, and we will hope to see each other soon. Maybe we can do some shows or something together, maybe, with all your broadcasting experience as well. Thank you so much for sharing the story. I think it's a really amazing story. I also think it's really interesting what you were saying about the racism and how we need to be more aware. And I wish you best of luck in all the running, and you've got to stay fit. For a little tip for you, because I'm a bit of a running fan, leg raises are quite nice to help you with your knees. Hold your legs straight and then lift them up so inches off the floor. So there are many techniques to strengthen your quads and stuff. But I'm sure you know all that, and you'll continue to do some great things. And we really, really value your time today. Thank you so much for joining us, Del. Thank you so much. Vaigu Ji Ka Khalsa, Why did you give for that?
Thank you very much, Dr. Savvy.